call of the Hogs can be heard all the way to San Francisco.
You're listening to Pod at the Palace with Curtis Wilkerson on Inside Arkansas.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the Pod at the Palace. I'm your host, Curtis Wilkerson with Inside Arkansas. Today's episode is presented by Razorbacks Apparel. Just go to razorbacks.com and use code HOGSBY20 for 20% off your first purchase today. We got a lot to get into in today's show, which will continue to have, like a recruiting type of theme as we continue to sift through just the excitement of the aftermath of Pete Sham and the grassroots season coming to an end. All those list cuts, visits being scheduled, intel coming in. It's good stuff. It's exciting times, honestly, for a time where there's not a lot of, actual basketball going on. So we'll take it. The main thing that I want to do today is sort of size up the contenders, if you will, rank the competition for Arkansas's two confirmed official visitors, Jordan Smith Jr. and Tay Kinney. But I do think before we get into that, we probably need to get into a little bit of see if we can get a feel for some big picture things that impact not just those two, but the high school recruiting class as a whole, because what was true for last year's class was not true for the year before and does not hold true for this one in particular. And then with the ever-changing landscape of college basketball, a lot of schools are operating differently. And where does Arkansas fall in line with that? So I think it's important to take into account that as we've kind of wrapped the summer here with the grassroots season, it's unanimously believed at this point by NBA scouts, evaluators, and most all college coaches that the 2026 class, it's very, very down, frankly, compared to the last couple of years. It doesn't mean there aren't good players, and understand all of these kids are going to be playing college basketball a year from now. That's a fact. But by and large, this is not expected to be one of those classes where you build a contender through incoming freshmen, like say Duke did this past year with Con Knipple and Malawach and Cooper Flagg and all those guys, or like Cal has done in the past. Like, it just doesn't profile to be that one. That doesn't mean that you can't have big time contributors who are incoming freshmen or whatever, but the roster construction, the norms, the patterns that a lot of these schools operate with, all those things are subject to change. They evolve. And when you have a down year, it's always interesting to see how the industry reacts, particularly with the way everything is looking by way of NIL and, the portal's still a thing, the international game, and then obviously this revenue sharing stuff. So for that reason, a lot of coaches are going to, hang on to their revenue share money, and they might prioritize player retention in portal even heavier than they already have. And we've touched on that, but again, it doesn't mean they won't take high school kids. But what it might mean is that these places that would typically take, 4 to 6 incoming freshmen, maybe they go with 2 to 3 instead and flesh out their roster with impactful players, elsewhere with other avenues. Cal, though, John Calipari, who is very much not a portal guy, we think we understand that. He utilizes it, but it's third on the totem pole with retention in freshmen. I think it's fair to say that. He would be an exception to the rule this year if he winds up going with 4+ high school kids, right? But I say that, and I also think, at least it can still be fruitful for Cal at Arkansas next season to do that under 2 conditions. One of them being, does he retain the right pieces with a core of contributors intact? Again, like he just did. Now, if you can get 4 big-time returners back, and then you have 3-4 freshmen coming in who are supplementing that, okay. You just don't want to be overly reliant on freshmen as a whole, especially if the class is a little bit down. So maybe this is like, 2 of DJ, Malik Thomas, Billy Richmond, and Isaiah Sealy return. And then you get Malik Ewan back, and then you have like an emerging Paolo Samito coming back. It's like a group of 4 or so from that. And then maybe you still have Elmer Zafich, like some other periphery guys coming back, whatever. All right, fine. And then you're a little bit more comfortable about, I don't even want to say taking flyers, but taking the younger, more unproven guys. The second condition there, I think, would be if he only wants to take 2 transfers or whatever, again, they really do need to be home run in variety this year, in my opinion. I'm not saying that Malik Ewan and Nick Pringle aren't very, very good and aren't going to be super impactful. They are. But you got to hit home runs in the portal if you're going to go light this year. So even if, say, Samito does pop as a freshman, hot take Tuesday, right? Unless you get like Tyron Stokes you probably need to go out and get a starting 4-man in the portal to pair with Malik Ewan, assuming you get him back in your front court, with the loss of Trevin Brazile impacted. Because outside of Stokes, who's really a wing, but I think you could play him at the 4 in kind of a jumbo role there. There aren't a lot of impact freshmen at that position who I think could come in and be SEC starters, like hand them the keys right away. I just don't see it. Unless you get Arifan Dion, then go get a proven, productive transfer big man, obviously to replace Nick Pringle and what you're losing there. So, hey, if you get one of those two as a freshman, Stokes or Arifan, then maybe it's time to add a transfer guard or a wing, depending on what the rest of the rotation looks like. So that's kind of my thought process there. 4 strong contributors back, 2 to 3 impact transfers. Okay, then I'm fine with the big freshman class, especially if it includes a pair of other heavy hitters potentially to go along with JJ Andrews. So something interesting that I heard from Adam Finkelstein and Matt Norlander on a podcast earlier Tuesday morning was that this 2026 class kind of compares to 2023, which is the Leighton Blocker year, by way of, in a typical year, it's fair to anticipate or expect that most of the top 10 prospects wind up being one and dones, right? That's just kind of the way that it works. Well, in 2023, Ron Holland, Mates Buzelis, both of those guys were G League Ignites. So I'm taking them out of the equation. I'm talking about college freshmen, incoming top 10. 5 were one and done and 5 weren't. In fact, Aaron Bradshaw, DJ Wagner, Mackenzie Mbako, Xavier Booker, and Elliot Cadeau are all actually still playing college basketball. And for what it's worth, so are 4 of the next 5 from that particular class. Omaha Blue, Ade Mara, Aiden Holloway, TJ Power, all playing college basketball. And my point in telling you guys this, it's twofold. First, I think there's at least more potential outside of Tyron Stokes, who just his projectables are off the charts there, for Arkansas to retain a top 10 guy or two than there would be in a typical year. So just keep that in mind as Arkansas goes along the process here of recruiting these guys. Secondly, and sort of the tricky part is that these guys are still expecting top 10 player money when they don't typically project as your typical top 10 stars out of the gates, if that makes sense in terms of overall impact. So some coaches will say no thanks and just go portal heavy, which could play into Arkansas's favor with Cal. But they'll have to be strategic with the revenue share in particular, especially with any, more early takes in terms of the high school seniors moving forward here. Now, for what it's worth, I had a fairly prominent agent in the college basketball space, one that his agency is representing one of Arkansas's players. I'll just put it that way. Told me that the understanding in the industry right now, by way of SEC basketball revenue share, just revenue share, is that it's Kentucky, a sizable gap, then Arkansas, then another gap, and then everyone else. So I found that to be really, really interesting there. And it doesn't necessarily surprise me. I mean, if there were 2 SEC schools that you would, maybe try to qualify as quote unquote basketball schools, that's probably where the conversation would start. So I get it. However, naturally, that matters a lot less today after the ruling came down Tuesday that the College Sports Commission and the NIL Go, Deloitte, the Clearinghouse, all that will now recognize collectives again as standard business deals as it pertains to NIL, which is just that's if you're wondering like, okay, what the hell does that mean? The entire point of the revenue share and this NIL clearinghouse and everything like that was to reduce the impact of these collectives, which just kind of allows power donors and boosters to buy up rosters. And the whole time we were thinking, we'll see how that works. Well, the first few weeks since this has gone into effect in July 1st, deals have been submitted on behalf of collectives or whatever. They were all getting denied. And so the thought was that collectives were going to kind of dry up and go away or shift into a different type of role. Well, now that's not the case. And we'll see what guardrails it'll look like. I saw somebody, I think it was Pete Nakos, that was getting some information there that was saying it might be a deal to where the typical NIL deal that gets submitted under $600 will just kind of get approved without even getting looked at. And anything above that would be subject to scrutiny. And for collectives, it might be closer to like $5,000 before they really take a look at it or whatever, which is interesting. Because I've heard that, there were some schools that might even be, in fact, it was Matt Norlander who was talking about it. Some schools, some coaches were saying, well, if that's the guidelines, then we might just get it set up to where there's a direct deposit of $599, every week or whatever for our particular players. That way we can just get them to wherever we need to get them in terms of their revenue share deal or their NIL deal, I guess, and not have to go through that entire process, not have to worry about it. And so now if you do it through collectives, maybe it'll be $5,000. We'll see what that looks like. But the point is, you'll probably have to add some things like speaking engagements for the players or foundation appearances or autograph sessions, whatever. But boosters are back in the game on the up and up, I think, is the big part of it here. So, bye-bye level playing field, like, sorry, Sam Pittman, with everything that you thought was going to happen there, unfortunately, it's just not going to be the case for you. This is like Hunter Yurchak's worst nightmare, man. He already cut the electricity off over at Arkansas Edge. So we'll see what they wind up doing here, what it's going to look like for Arkansas and what their response is going to be. That's an entirely different conversation for a different show, frankly. But it's great for hoops, for college basketball, to have this easy way to keep John Tyson and keep whoever else involved above board. And it closed that perceived gap that might be there with Kentucky or the Big East or whoever with revenue share. It's massive. And it's so funny to me because did any of you really believe, and I hope you didn't believe for a second, that the SEC was just going to sit and watch Kentucky just not give a damn about football and then double everybody else's money on the basketball front and revenue share, or the Big East to capitalize on not having football schools and kind of get a monopoly on basketball with their revenue share. And they weren't going to do anything about it. They were just going to say, okay, fair enough. Yeah, right, man. You cannot open the floodgates for student athlete earnings and then try to turn around and cap them. And you certainly cannot tell rich and powerful people, what they can't spend their money on. It took all of 3 weeks for all parties involved to figure that out. And now here we are. I'm sorry. It's just hilarious to me. I got sidetracked. I didn't mean to do this, but good grief. I mean, it's hilarious that this is the case. But it's a good thing for Arkansas basketball. I'll tell you that right now. It is a good thing for Arkansas basketball. Tune in to Inside Arkansas Live. We'll talk about the impact for football and Arkansas athletics and as a whole and everything like that, whatever. But let me get back on track here. What intrigues me about this 2026 class is I think that there are several top-level prospects who probably project better as guys who are ready to contribute to college basketball right away, early on, have a big impact, who don't have as much of the major NBA draft stock boxes checked. And what I'm saying is that their high ranking, it's based on production more than potential, at least compared to typical years. That's a good thing. I think Arkansas is involved with several guys who kind of meet that qualification, which means if you're going to take a bunch of freshmen, a high-level freshman class, you want more of those guys because it's not about the projectables. It's about coming in and being able to help you right away. I think J.J. Andrews is a really good example of that. I think Jordan Smith Jr., who we're getting ready to talk about, is a very, very good example of that as well. Hey, today's episode of the Pod at the Palace is brought to you by our friends over at Looper Auction Realty. Why wait months or even years to sell your home the traditional way? At Looper Auction Realty, they offer a faster, smarter option. Sell your home at an auction. There's no repairs, no contingencies, no drawn out negotiations. I've been through this process. It's stressful. It's not a lot of fun. But Looper Auction Realty, you set the terms, buyers compete, and you walk away with a firm closing date. Whether it's your home, an estate, or an investment property, the auction method puts you in control and it helps you get it sold fast. So call Looper Auction Realty, 479-996-4848, or visit looperauction.com. Looper Auction Realty, sold in 30, closed in 30. Okay, so what I want to do now is just take a few minutes to just literally size up the competition, rank the contenders, if you will, for Jordan Smith Jr. and Tay Kinney. And I think what we're going to do is make this a regular thing moving forward when a Razorback prospect gets a visit officially on the books, or there's a list cut or whatever. And we may do it again once we get closer to visit time or decision time when dates are set. I think it could be a fun way to keep up with where things are trending. So let's start with Jordan Smith Jr. I'm going to pull up a graphic here so people can look at it instead of my face while I talk about him. the nation's number 2 prospect, right? 6'2" combo guard. We've talked about him a ton on this show. Such a fun player in this class. An absolute winner. A lot of the ways that we describe JJ Andrews is just a competitor, a winner, powerful, downhill, defender, all those things you could just copy and paste for Jordan Smith Jr. He's going to be on campus September 20th and 21st. With Jordan Smith Jr., if I had to call it right now, I would say that the two schools with some separation here are Arkansas and Duke. And if you put a hot dog to my head and say, give me a leader, I would probably say slightly in Arkansas's direction, but not comfortably. I think there's a long way to go here. Here's what I'll say. Certainly Arkansas has as good of a shot as anyone today to land Jordan Smith Jr. at this stage. The pros here, the positives for Arkansas, I think the John Calipari effect, it's huge. Of course it is. It's a top guard, a blue chip guard, and it's John Calipari. Everybody knows he is not afraid to hand the keys to a freshman guard and let him go. So the track record speaks for itself with the NBA pedigree. We don't have to talk a whole lot about this because there are things that we already know. But I will say that, after a quote unquote down draft year by Cal standards, I do think Jordan Smith Jr.'s camp will probably be paying pretty close attention to a guy like Darius Acuff, who profiles similarly closely as it pertains to Arkansas, especially if they intend to drag out the process a little bit. And, he has a visit set up to Arkansas. He's got a visit set up in October to Kentucky. And he said he might want to go back to Duke. He might want to check out this school, that school. We'll see if all those things happen, but it gives off the vibes of a guy who might wait. And we've heard some scuttle that he could be one of those guys that waits until the spring. Now, things change. If dominoes start, falling and coming off the board, that process might speed up. If he takes, this visit or two and really likes what he's seeing, why wait? If the addition of collectives back into the conversation, money wise, could change things, and he gets to where he wants, then okay, boom, there you go. We're back in the game. Let's just go ahead and commit early and then enjoy our senior season. So all those things are on the table there. Fit wise with Arkansas, I think it depends. Like it would make less sense than Boogie Fland or Darius Acuff pairing with what would be a year for DJ Wagner potentially. But that's also without seeing the strides that DJ makes as a shooter this year and how it looks with him paired with Acuff, and we don't even know if DJ is going to be back. So I just want to throw that out there. But are they recruiting Jordan Smith Jr. as a point guard or a combo guard? I would imagine, given Cal's, his NBA influence, that he would be recruiting Jordan Smith Jr. as a point guard, because that's where he's going to profile if he's going to get in the league and find a role for himself when he's kind of a non-shooter and a little bit undersized at 6'2", it would be as a point guard. Because I can tell you for sure that Jordan Smith Jr. is at the top of Arkansas's board. But positionally in college, at least, or maybe he's a guy that wants to do both, but that would kind of tell us if a guy like Tay Kinney, who we're going to talk about in a minute, is he a plan B or is he a priority by way of, pairing them together? And then do they see JJ Andrews then as more of a 3 potentially, as opposed to a 2? And all these guys can do a little bit of both, but you get what I'm saying. And what I will say is, like, Jordan Smith Jr. and JJ Andrews, my goodness, like that would be the best defensive freshman backcourt in the country. And honestly, the most physical. That would be a lot of fun. And then we could dream about that, that tandem potentially being paired with, a sophomore Malik Thomas, maybe, and, Isaiah Sealy in his breakout year. I mean, goodness gracious, that'd be a lot of fun. At any rate, like we said, the contenders, top contender, Duke. I think that's very clear at this point. The Paul VI pipeline, which where he goes to school, it's very, very real with Duke. Trevor Keels, Jeremy Roach, Patrick Ngamba, Darren Harris, all guys from that school who have gone to Duke. John Shire, to his credit, he has a great early track record of winning at a high level while letting his freshmen rock. Duke is closer to home for him. He's a DMV area guy. He has already visited there. It's like there's a lot of reasons to like Duke here. There are. And Arkansas has got some smoke and some momentum right now. And you get them on campus for the visit, you feel really good about where you're at. But we are not discounting Duke at all right here. Could go either way. Lurking there, I think Kentucky is one to keep an eye on for sure. with those deep pockets. We know that they've got more revenue share than everybody in the SEC. And then obviously with the collective stuff, they're going to be able to fork over the funny money there. Mark Pope, I think, really got in there, maybe behind the scenes a little bit with Jordan Smith Jr. by coaching him with USA Basketball this summer. He is visiting Kentucky for their Big Blue Madness, which is a cool deal. I have to admit, I give him credit for that. So there are some things working in favor of Kentucky there, kind of getting into the mix here a little bit later. But what's working against them? Mark Pope's style, I'm just being honest here, it's not conducive to an alpha, which Jordan Smith Jr. is going to want to be. It's not conducive to a non-shooter, which Jordan Smith Jr. is. He can make them, and we'll see if that becomes an improving part of his game, but it's certainly not his forte. And in 2 years at Kentucky, Pope has been very super portal reliant. So much so that he recruited a very, very talented freshman guard in Caden Lewis right off of the roster into a decommitment, and Jasper Johnson potentially right out of the rotation. We'll see, or at least into a more limited role than he would be elsewhere. So you got to see how this year plays out, or whatever, how long he drags on his recruitment. But those are potential red flags there for Kentucky with these top end freshmen, which is part of why Pope has, I don't want to say struggled because it's a little early for that, but kind of failed to get those top tier freshmen who haven't come straight out of the state of Kentucky so far. Georgetown is essentially the hometown school here. Easy access for Ed Cooley to be a consistent presence around him. But honestly, I think that's about it in terms of what they have going for them. Not seeing it there with Georgetown unless they really dump a ton of money out there for him here. Louisville, I mean, Pat Kelsey's trending, man, as a recruiter. I got to give him credit. Louisville has big money. We know that. They seem to be a little heavier on some others to me, like Tyron Stokes, for example, and the guy that we're getting ready to talk about here in a minute, and Tay Kinney. But, I also think just like Darius Acuff is one to watch for Jordan Smith Jr. at Arkansas, Mikel Brown Jr. would be one to watch with his development and his season, how it works and how Pat Kelsey uses him as a freshman league guard, there at Louisville. So other schools in the mix, like Indiana, Syracuse, I'm not seeing it right now with Jordan Smith Jr., even though he has taken an unofficial visit to Syracuse already. So that's kind of where I think things are with him at this stage. Now, let's move on to Tay Kinney, another 5-star and the number 1 point guard in his class. The first question I think is, okay, well, is it one or the other or both, right? Like could him and Jordan Smith Jr. play together? In my opinion, the answer is a pretty resounding yes, they could. In fact, I think they would complement each other really well in a backcourt, aside from both being maybe a little bit undersized from a height perspective. Will they play together? I don't know. Like, is it even feasible at a place like Arkansas? A lot of that would depend on when these guys are looking to make their decisions and what you're looking at by way of retention, right? Because I don't think it would work if you have a Malik Thomas coming back. I don't think it would work if you had a DJ Wagner coming back, because I think both of these guys would command pretty significant roles. I say that, but you have, Acuff, Leak, and DJ right now. So we'll see. But could they play together? They certainly could. And I think it would work. Now, Tay Kinney dropped a top 12 for whatever it's worth on Tuesday. I'm not going to read that off because it's a top 12. And realistically, there aren't 12 schools that are actually involved here, like serious players. I just really don't think that's the case. So with Kinney, of all the schools, that are involved, perceived to be whatever, I would say the full group out of all 12 schools or whatever, Arkansas is one of a handful, realistically, of maybe 3 or 4 or so that I would say feel firmly in the mix right now. And that could change given some of the places that he's planning on going. Because some of the places he has visits scheduled to, I just don't feel are super big players in that game right now. But I would say Arkansas probably in that range of 4-ish that I feel are serious players in the game right now. But I would not classify Arkansas as the leader at this stage, not yet. What's working in Arkansas's favor? A lot of the same stuff, right? I mean, it's John Calipari and it's a guard. But Tay Kinney plays at overtime elite, which we know Cal's history with. Hell, we've had Carter Knox and Malik Thomas both come out of there just in less than a year and a half that John Calipari has been in Fayetteville. Now, he is a Kentucky native. which, yes, it looms large for Louisville and Kentucky, who are in that group of favorites, I would say, with I think Arkansas and probably, maybe Kansas would be another one that I'd put pretty high up there. But this is a kid who, again, grew up in Kentucky. So what was he doing? He was hearing about, watching, identifying with, and just having it shoved down his throat. John Calipari, right? Coach Cal. That was the thing in Kentucky for 15 years. And this is a 17, 18-year-old kid. So low key, it would be hilarious to snipe the nation's top ranked point guard out of the Bluegrass State. I mean, it would be really, really funny if that happened. And it'd be a big get for Arkansas. I mean, this kid is good, man. He can play. I mean, he was kind of busting rear ends on the Adidas circuit at the end of the summer, and he was hurt. So Kinney's a big personality, to say the least, big social media following. He has his 6'7" brand water or whatever. I think he would be a real fun pair with Jordan Smith Jr., a good compliment. All those things play into account there. What I will say is there's also the endorsement angle of this. In some cases, it doesn't matter. Like Darius Acuff, for example, with Reebok. Oh, he's going to a Nike school. Cooper Flagg with New Balance. He went to a Nike school, right? In Kinney's case, though, I'm led to believe that it might play more of a role than it does with some other guys. Doesn't have to, but it could be a factor in there. He is an Adidas guy right now, and he has to re-up his endorsement deal at some point. I would assume it's going to be Adidas again. It doesn't have to be. I would assume it would be. Whether that carries over into college or not remains to be seen, but it can certainly have an influence, is all I'm saying here. So you kind of look at the other Adidas schools that are in the mix, Louisville being one of them, Louisville, who I think might be your leader right now. So a lot of things kind of working in their favor there at this point. Kansas, an Adidas school, Indiana, another one. So some others there to keep an eye on, particularly if he winds up re-upping with Adidas or whatever. Timeline wise, I think this one is shaping up to be a world tour. Like, he's already gone to Kentucky and Louisville and Purdue for visits, scheduled for Kansas, Oregon, Indiana, Texas, and then Arkansas to round things out on September 25th, 26th for that Notre Dame football weekend. On one hand, it's like, hey, last visit means lasting impression, right? On the other, especially if he's a priority for you, then you kind of have to sweat it out and make sure that you get him through all those other stops and onto your campus to close it out. So we'll certainly keep an eye on it, but that's kind of where I think things are shaping up here at this point. So going to get out of here for today. Fun show. And we got a lot to talk about as we continue to move forward here with this. It's like a soap opera, college athletics and how it pertains to college basketball, recruiting, Arkansas, all those things. But subscribe where you need to get subscribed to the Inside Arkansas YouTube channel, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Pod Pals will be found there, and we will be back tomorrow morning. It's been Curtis Wilkerson with Inside Arkansas. You guys have a good day. We'll see you next time.